Every October, the inhabitants of North America revive the ancient Celtic custom of Samhain, which we have renamed Halloween to make it easier to pronounce. We completely immerse ourselves in an orgy of supernatural terror and pay a king's ransom in chocolate and high fructose corn syrup to any costumed urchin who comes to our doors and threatens us with a vague trick. It is a completely ridiculous custom and we love it. And to help celebrate, Travis and I have designed this Halloween lantern, or Samhain lantern if you prefer. For those of you who want to look it up, it's pronounced Samhain, but it's spelled Samhain, S-A-M-H-A-I-N. Apparently, the ancient Celts could spell better than they could pronounce. Samhain was a celebration of the harvest that it began at sunset on the last day of October. The Celts believed that on this particular night, the souls of the dead could cross over into the land of the living. So the participant wore costumes to confuse the spirits and carried torches and lanterns to warn them off. These lanterns were said to be made out of hollowed out vegetables from the harvest and carved with scary faces to convince the spirits that these people were just too ridiculous to mess with. I was fresh out of vegetables, so I made this lantern out of wood. I know it's hard to believe, but it is what it is. It's designed so that you don't need expensive wood or a lot of tools to make it. It's created from common 1x pine that you can find at most home improvement stores. And you can make it with just a table saw, a hand drill, and a jigsaw or saber saw. The only ingredient that might be a little hard to find is 1/8 inch or 3 millimeters thick plywood. We use this to make the lantern faces. This material is often used with laser cutter engravers. In fact, you can use a laser cutter to create the faces if you have one available. And if you can't find this in a store, it's available online. We have a link in our affiliate website. And because this is a seasonal decoration, I made it so that you can take it apart and store it with all the pieces laid flat. You just put it back together every Halloween, or whenever you need to ward off the evil spirits. April the 15th comes to mind. To make this lantern, first start by cutting all the parts to size, except for the base. For right now, make the base the same size as the top. We'll cut it down later on. Also, make some extra posts. These require some fairly precise machining and we'll need them for test pieces. Let's begin by drilling some holes. The lantern posts will have dowels on each end, and these dowels must fit into stopped holes in the top and the base. First, determine which of the surfaces in the top and the base get these holes. This white pine has a tendency to cup. I suggest you drill holes in the concave surfaces so that the long bolt that holds these parts together will pull them flat. These holes have to line up precisely, so I made a drill guide from a scrap of plywood to position them. Clamp the drill guide to the top. Then, using the guide, drill the holes so that they are just 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters deep in the top. Do the same for the base. Then, after both the top and the base are drilled, cut the base to size, trimming 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters off each edge. Next, drill a counterbore in the bottom of the base, opposite where you drilled the dowel holes. This will hide the hardware that holds the lantern together. Then, drill 3/8 inch or 10 millimeter diameter holes completely through the center of the base, the top, the middle cap, and the top cap. We'll use these holes to align the parts when we glue the top and the caps together. Now we have one more set of holes to drill, and that's the dowel holes in the ends of the lantern posts. These holes must be centered in the ends. And to help do this, I've made a simple jig to help guide the drill bit. The stop collar stops the drill when the holes are the proper depth. And don't worry if the holes are just a little off-center. You can compensate for this later on. Once you've drilled the holes, glue dowels in the ends of the lantern posts. These dowels must protrude no more than 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters. You may want to make the dowels a little long and then cut them to length after the glue cures. Remember to chamfer the cut edges. Once you've done that, it's time to cut the grooves in the post that will hold the lantern faces. Now, these plywood faces are about the same thickness as a standard saw curve. However, we're about to apply a water-based stain and finish to all of those parts, and that's going to cause the plywood to swell just a little bit. So I suggest we cut the grooves just a little wider. First, decide where you want to make the grooves. Inspect the ends, and if the dowels are a little off-center, mark those surfaces where there is the most meat. That's where you want those grooves. Set your fence and make the first pass over the saw with all the posts. Then move the fence 1/64 of an inch, or about half a millimeter, and pass the posts over the saw blade a second time. This will give you the fit you need. At this point, you want to do a test assembly to make sure that the posts, the base, the top, and the face panels all fit together. Make any necessary adjustments if they don't. On this lantern, I had to trim the panels narrower to compensate for off-center dowels in the posts. If you find a dowel hole or two in the wrong place, no worries. Just plug the hole with a dowel and drill another. When you're satisfied that everything fits like it should, take it all apart, and let's go back to the table saw. Cut the 45-degree bevels in the edges of the top and the top cap. To provide the necessary support I need for this operation, I've attached a tall fence jig to my table saw fence and placed them both to the left of the blade, opposite the direction the blade is leaning. Then glue the top and the cap parts together. Insert a waxed metal rod, or in this case a drill bit, through the holes in the center of all three parts to help align them. Don't worry, later on the glue will easily flake off the bit. While the glue is drying on the top, cut the lantern faces. We provide 5 full-size patterns with our lantern plans, and you can use one pattern per panel, as we did on this lantern, or you can stack up all 4 panels and cut just one pattern in all of them. Your call. I'm using a scroll saw to cut these designs. This saw lets you cut interior shapes without cutting through from the outside edge of the panel. Just drill a hole inside the shape, thread one end of the saw blade through the hole, tension the blade, and cut. As I mentioned before, you can also use a laser cutter if you have one. Maybe even a CNC router with a very small bit, or a coping saw if you're old school and have time to spare. But if you don't have any of those tools lying around, you might try something like this. This is nothing more than my handheld saber saw mounted to a table made out of scraps. When I first started woodworking, I couldn't afford a scroll saw or a bandsaw, so I made this jig. It can't do everything that a bandsaw and a scroll saw can do, but for projects like this, it works just fine. I've included the plans for this jig with the plans for the lantern, just in case you find them useful. With the lantern faces completed, we're in the home stretch. Give everything a good sanding, and then we'll apply a stain to give this lantern its Halloween colors. I used water-based aniline dyes to color the wood. I mixed up 4 parts yellow dye to 1 part red to make the vibrant orange for the faces. Then I stained all the lantern parts, the base, the top, and the posts, jet black. The water-based stain on the faces may warp the thin panels, so I stacked them up like I would dry lumber. I used stickers to hold them apart, and then I clamped the stack to a flat surface to keep the panels flat and true while they dried. This flat surface, by the way, is our assembly table, another useful jig you may want to check out. When the stain dries, apply a little wipe-on water-based finish. This will set the stain and help protect the wood. When that dries, give everything a light going over with a little gray Scotch-Brite. Then apply a little wax to the black lantern parts. This will give them a little shine. As for the lantern faces, we're going to cover the inside surfaces with a little wax paper. This will diffuse the light. Remember those extra posts I told you to make? Well, put one of those on each side of a face panel to protect the edges from what comes next. Spray the inside surfaces of the panel with a spray adhesive. Not too much. Then apply a sheet of wax paper to the panel and trim it to size. It shouldn't quite reach the posts when the panels are in their grooves. This wax paper not only diffuses the light, it prevents you from looking through the faces and seeing parts of other faces. This is not only confusing, it can be truly terrifying. Surprisingly, this wax paper holds up pretty well. However, if you want something more substantial, you can put frosted acrylic panels behind these faces. This, however, adds a great deal of expense. Okay, one more thing before we put this sucker together and see what we've got. Open up the central holes in the base and the assembled top with a drill bit that's just a little bit larger than the one you originally used. Let's say 25/64 or 10.5 millimeters. This will make it easier to insert the long bolt. And to make that long bolt, I'm using a lamp pipe, like you'd use to run wires in a lamp. Put a nut and a washer on one end and insert it in the base. Then put the posts in their holes in the base and insert 3 of the 4 panels. Now, we need to add some lights to this lantern. I'm using 2 of these pumpkin lights, which you can turn on and off with a remote. Sounds pretty expensive, I know, but they're actually pretty reasonable. There's a link to these lights in our affiliate site. With the lights in place, slide the last panel between its posts. Then put the top in place. This will require some patience, some luck, and a highly imaginative bluish vocabulary. When you have recovered from the ordeal, and apologize to everyone else in the room, secure the assembly with an eye nut. This not only holds the parts together, it allows you to hang the lantern should you want to do so. There's also a link for this doohickey on our site. And now, for the moment of truth. You see that? All the evil spirits just left the shop. The plans for the Halloween or Samhain lantern can be found at our Workshop Companion general store, along with the instructions on how to pronounce it. Sources for the thin plywood, pumpkin light, and other hardware can be found on our affiliate site. The small royalties that we earn from your purchases help us keep doing what we do here at the Workshop Companion. So please, like, subscribe, and buy something to keep those videos coming. And, as always, thank you for your kind attention.